For those I have not had the privilege of meeting, my name is Scott DeRue, and I have the honor of serving as Dean here at the University of Michigan's Ross School of Business. I want to welcome everyone around the world who is joining us. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you might be around the world. We have a very exciting conversation with the one, the only Rich Eisen today. But before we begin, I want to say to all of you who are joining, to you, your families, your loved ones, I hope everyone in your family, in your world is healthy and safe. To all of our students and alumni who are joining us, I miss you. I look forward to the day that we can be together in person once again. I'm here in Studio A where we're practicing extreme social distancing. I want to just briefly introduce someone who doesn't really need an introduction to the Michigan family, the one, the only Rich Eisen. Rich, thank you for joining us. Words cannot express how grateful we are for taking time to be a part of our Ross Talk series.
It's my pleasure. I don't know if if I had the GPA to ever get into this program back in the day. So better late than never. At least I'm in the door.
You are welcome. You are always part of our family. For those that don't know, Rich graduated from the University of Michigan in 1990, which seems like yesterday, right, Rich?
Yeah, right. Yeah, 1990. I was there in Bo's final season as head coach. The March, I graduated the spring after Ramil Robinson hit those free throws to beat Seton Hall. I know I'm dating myself, but I left before the Fab Five arrived on campus, and it was one of the greatest experiences I've ever had, really.
Yeah, no, it's tremendous, and you've had an amazing career. In my mind, you're most famous for your time at the Staten Island Advance. And that was one of Rich's first forays into journalism. But you all might know him for his time at ESPN with I'm a Tar Heel, Rich, so my fellow Tar Heel Stuart Scott used to spend a lot of time with. And his time at ESPN, the NFL Network. You've seen him on Comedy Central, CBS, all over the place. So Rich is doing amazing things, and it's really an honor to have you as part of our Ross Talk series. And I don't know how many people know your background, and so I'm wondering if you can talk about, you were born in Brooklyn, grew up in Staten Island. How did you find your way to Ann Arbor, Michigan?
Well, I'm from, as you pointed out, New York City. And so, I grew up in Staten Island. I basically moved there when I was 6 months old. So the first extended time I ever spent in the Midwest was when I was a freshman at Michigan, which I found because when I was looking at schools in 1984, 1985, the movie The Big Chill came out, Dean, and it was about, as you know, a bunch of Michigan graduates years later trying to come back together as friends in different walks of life, trying to reminisce and get the good times back with a nice Motown soundtrack behind them. And it made Michigan a red hot school. And I remember there was a Today Show episode where either Bryant Gumbel or Jane Pauley was from the Michigan campus and the other was sitting on the campus of Brown. My parents were diehard watchers of the Today Show, and they suggested, why not Michigan? Somebody down the street from me had started going there. So immediately, of course, since my parents asked or advised it or brought it up, I immediately rejected it until I went to a symposium in Manhattan. And a bunch of Michigan students were running the symposium, and I went there, and they seemed to be the most genuine, the most down-to-earth, most intelligent, most well-rounded, most filled with humor and excitement and just like real human beings. So I said, okay, I'll go visit. We went and visited probably in the winter of 1985. We stayed in the Bell Tower Hotel, and a foot of snow fell. And even with, snow and it being freezing, and I fell in love with the place. End of story. And I got in, and it was truly, as I mentioned, one of the greatest things to ever happen to me. The experience was remarkable, just from start to finish, affording me the education that I needed, and obviously the opportunities to do other aspects, enjoy other aspects of of student life, from working at the Michigan Daily, the greatest student publication in the United States, and having experiences of, again, covering the Michigan hockey team with then coach Red Berenson, and then Michigan football and Bo's last season. I went to the U Club, the University Club, where there was a stand-up comedy event called Laugh Track, and I did stand-up comedy in the student union once a month. Joined a fraternity. Just, it was truly, again, amazing. And then, being a New Yorker, amazing things happen. Like, you'd step a foot in the street and cars would stop for you. Things like that. I'd never experienced anything like that, which made it difficult to go home. I would think that cars were going to stop for me just because I was walking the street and you died, getting hit.
Yeah, you might get hit.
Oh my gosh! But I look, I could go. I'm obviously going on and on. It was just a remarkable stroke that I found Michigan. Michigan found me, and I fly the colors. I talk about it as much as I possibly can in any walk of life that I have, or any platform that I have.
No, I appreciate that. In my almost now 14 years here at the university, I didn't have the privilege of going to school here, but this place has left an indelible mark on all of us who come through Ann Arbor and have an opportunity and the privilege to be a part of this family. And it really is a family, 600,000+ alumni in our community. So thank you again.
Everywhere. We are everywhere. It's great.
That's right. No matter where we go, there's always a Go Blue. So, Rich, there are so many things happening in our world right now, and that interconnect with the world of sport and the world of entertainment. And I'd love to touch on a few of those. We asked the many people who are joining us today to submit questions, and had an opportunity to go through those questions and find some common themes. So for those that are joining us, you'll see your questions and the themes woven throughout our conversation today. And certainly we can't, we'd be remiss to not talk about COVID and the pandemic and the impact that it's having. And big changes as a result of the pandemic for the NCAA, for all the major professional sports leagues, the NFL, MLB, hockey, basketball. We've got NBA and hockey bubbles. We've got MLB teams that are still traveling and being locked out of countries and cities and things of that sort. And so I'd love to just start by understanding from you, in all of that you've seen over the last few months in the world of sport and entertainment in response to COVID, what's most surprised you, whether it be in one of the professional sports leagues, in collegiate sports? What's most surprised you in how the leagues and the conferences are responding to the pandemic?
I would say the thing that surprised me most, if you don't mind me kind of switching up, is the way that people who love sports and who love entertainment don't wear a mask. It really is. That's the thing that has completely shocked me, because you saw the Bundesliga in Germany be the first to restart. You see the Premier League in the UK restarting. You see other sports leagues in Europe restarting. You see the NHL deciding to move to Canada to restart. And there's a reason why they're able to restart, is because they, as societies and government response, if not union response, did the hard work. And the fact that people say, I want my sports, but I'm not going to wear a mask going into Costco, if we all do that, if we all buckled down right now, like starting now, as soon as we hang up from this Zoom, if we as a nation buckled down, we would be able to have the sports in the manner in which we hope to have them. And we've already seen with Major League Baseball that it has taken only one weekend of play for one team in the Miami Marlins, whose COO, as we all know, spent a cup of coffee at the University of Michigan in Derek Jeter, that they have a significant number of COVID positive players, to remove them from action until next Monday at the earliest, as that was announced shortly before we came on here today. The NFL is beginning to have intake COVID tests for its players. Shortly before we went on the air, the first number that was announced was 21. I'm wondering if that was just the certain number of teams that have done it, or if that's league wide. I don't have that information right here. But the NFL is hoping that in creating 32 separate bubble universes, I mean, the facilities, each team facility will be its own bubble, into which players will enter and be tested on a daily basis to make sure that there is no COVID within their bubble of their workplace. And that the NFL will hope that players understand the responsibility that they have to their teammates, their coaches, their union and league, to stay at home once they're out of the facility to try and stay COVID free. And there's even, I noticed part of the agreement between the league and the Players Association in the NFL is that players must stay away from what was called high-risk situations, and if they don't, they can forfeit their salary. Hopefully that would be an incentive for players who might want to potentially go out at night not to do it. And if the NFL can pull all of that off with a once-a-week travel regimen, unlike the Major League Baseball teams that are out there traveling in 2-3 different cities potentially per week, there's a possibility of doing that. I know, again, you're asking me about if anything surprised me from a league point of view. I guess the first surprise was at the very beginning that the Ivy League was first up to cancel their entire conference tournament basketball, their conference basketball tournament. Again, this is back in March. That was just jarring. But sports led the way in this country to show about how important it was to lock down. So hopefully this can be done in a way, but the shocking aspect to me of the number of people who I believe would want sports, would want to go to a movie theater, would want to go to a concert, would want to have some sense of normalcy, that the first step in doing all of this would be to take a piece of cloth and put it over their mouths and their noses as well, when they're out and about. And that's been the most shocking thing to me.
Yeah, and it's it's so easy to do,
Yes.
and been proven to be effective, and yet we have so many who are not.
And then there are many too, Dean, that would take a listen to this conversation and think that we're being political, right?
Yes.
And that is, again, I know I'm talking to a University of Michigan audience, so this is a real life conversation. And I know that comes across as arrogant to those outside of the Michigan community, but to them I say tough, which is arrogant in its own way. Putting it all together, the fact that they could be, hey, I'm virtue signaling or anything like that. It is an actual bona fide scientific fact that if we all mask up, this could be handled in a much better, quicker, safer manner. And we can have sports back. We can have the ability to have a season that's not interrupted 3 days in, to have a team about a third of which be COVID positive within a span of 3 days. And I can only hope that does not happen in any of the other sports that are attempting to come back.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be tough. To your point, public health has been politicized, and it's also the case that many of our athletes, whether it be at the college level or the pro level, they're trying to figure out how to live their lives. And you've seen even in the NBA bubble that they've got a hotline where athletes can call in and essentially report on other athletes that are breaking the rules, and we've seen evidence that that's happening. And so how much confidence do you have in our leagues at this point of being able to manage this?
Well, you know what? I could give you an answer, but nobody knows. I mean, Dr. Fauci himself has said that the NFL needs to be in a bubble world to have a successful season because the virus itself will give you the timeline. I don't know. I mean, the NFL has a 17-week-long regular season. You want to say you're fortunate enough to make the Super Bowl, you're talking about potentially including training camp on the front end, which is now going to be all that there is. The NFL and the Players Association did away with preseason football. That you're talking about now until February. And, the NBA can bubble themselves for 2-3 months right now. What happens when the NBA needs to restart its 2020-2021 season potentially in November or December. Will they then bubble up for 6-7 months? I don't think that that's feasible. The NHL and the NBA are able to bubble right now because they're finishing a truncated season, and so, or an interrupted season. And baseball is not bubbling to finish up or to start and finish a truncated season. We're already seeing the problems with that. So again, I don't have an answer for you. If I was an NFL general manager right now, I would look for a third string quarterback that you think can win football games and quarantine that person. Literally keep that person separate from the rest of the team, because if, let's say, a center becomes COVID positive, you'd have to say that the people he's most close to is the quarterback. And if the quarterback needs to be quarantined, then the second stringer who's been with this quarterback in a meeting room will have to be quarantined as well. And a third string quarterback will be a very important member of the team, as a couple of teams like the Steelers and Duck Hodges learned last year, that the third string quarterback can sometimes be pressed into service. That's what the season's going to be. And I understand I'm talking about it in terms of roster, which in a pandemic makes, very little sense. But if you're attempting to play in a pandemic, this is the sort of stuff a general manager needs to think of. So I honestly don't have an answer for you in terms of my confidence level. You could just come up with the protocols, hope that the players that are involved understand that in order for it all to work, the normal aspects of life need to be placed aside. The trappings and trimmings need to be placed aside, and you go play some sports.
I appreciate that. If we take out our crystal ball and look 5 years out, what is the impact on sports and the entertainment or consumption of sports? What do you think are the longer term impacts of the experience that we're going through right now?
Well, in terms of long term, financially, I'm genuinely concerned about college sports right now. Certainly since football drives the bus financially for so many athletic departments, that if the football season for college is impacted in the same way that, we're talking about the NFL trying it, there's a union. Their players are being paid. In college sports, we all know that that's not the case, or at least it's not supposed to be. And different schools have different financial scenarios that might not be able to provide the same health protocols as a blue blood school, if you will. Which is why I think many conferences were smart to get rid of the non-conference portion of the schedule. It buys more time since conference play usually begins later in the season for a lot. But it also levels the playing field that most Big Ten schools can have the same health protocols, but Michigan's third opponent in Arkansas State, if you will, might not have had the same health protocols as the University of Michigan. I'm genuinely concerned about college sports and the monetary effect and what it means for smaller sports, if you will, that do depend upon the largesse of the football program. So that said, I'm concerned financially. In terms of sports, I think things are, with sports is, for me, and I think for many in the sports and entertainment industry, the only live, must-see live, DVR-proof pieces of programming, where everybody gets around and wants to watch it live, with the exception of, say, The Voice, where, families want to get together and watch something that requires you to vote on your phone. My God, my children love The Masked Singer on Fox. That outside of all,
you should go with The Masked Singer. You should be one.
You know what? The number of times that my children thought it might be me in one of those costumes, and they all think that it's the most famous people on the planet inside these costumes, that there's a bounty in the house, I should say. Yeah, that if an Obama, Michelle, Barack, is Sasha a member of the University of Michigan, right? Or is it correct? Or Malia, any Obama or LeBron, or they think every female singer is Beyonce, I say if any of them is on The Masked Singer, they receive a crisp $100 bill from their dad. That will happen. To date, I have not had to pay any out. But to that point, though, there's so few things that get people around a television set as a family or a group. And sports is DVR proof. You need to see it live. You're not gonna, really. I mean, you can record an event, but you probably have to watch it before sundown or before you go to sleep because you'll hear about it the next day. So that's one thing. But the world, I think, is heading to a streamers world. I think that more and more cable networks are going to struggle to stay afloat, and many corporations are going to put their dollars and cents into a streamer as opposed to keeping cable television channels as a main economic engine, certainly with cord cutters and less subscribers, and satellite television becoming less and less of a player in the game. So I think streaming is where we're all headed. And I think many opportunities that you're seeing. The NFL is already there with Amazon having the Thursday night game, Peacock on NBC having a wild card game. Premier League games are going on Peacock. Some of the U.S. Open NBC is putting on their Peacock, and soon there may be a show with my name on it that goes on Peacock.
Quick plug.
There's, there is an I in Rich and Eisen, Dean, So put it all together. I think this is a streamer's world that we're living in. In 5 years from now, many events will wind up being streamed to your television sets.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it's really interesting to see some of the creativity of the content producers around how to use streaming to create new and different ways to engage audiences and fans into the experience of sports. So I think there's all sorts of innovation that could come out of that shift. Let me, in the spirit of shifting, let me go to another theme that came up in a lot of the questions that were submitted, as well as just our shared experience over the last few months, is the social and racial injustices that we've seen, and the intersection of society and sport in many ways. And I'd love to get your input on what you see as the role of sport in mobilizing to advance a more just and equitable society.
Just look at Jackie Robinson. I mean, sports has always been a hopeful bellwether for society in the United States and America. And that sports is usually what goes first sometimes. We talk about Colin Kaepernick now, Muhammad Ali, back in his day, using his platform to try and bring about change, was something that cost him dearly for quite some time. And now we do remember Muhammad Ali for something completely different, but it is definitely part of what he stood for. Arthur Ashe. We could go on and on and on about the importance of sports and how it brings it home right in front of many people in America to lead the way, and also perhaps make things a little bit more open, people's minds a little bit more open. Just the kneeling on the flag for the national anthem, we're seeing more people do it now, more people understanding that it is not anything against, it is truly something to bring light, shed light on. It is not against the military. It is not done to be against anything other than the fact that it's against inequality. And you're seeing already more and more people understand what that form of peaceful protest is about. So I am hoping, again, but then again, I've come from the campus of the University of Michigan. I'm hoping, again, that we become a more cognizant society through what we're about to see. Again, you're seeing NBA players use their pre-season, and I assume they will do it when the games start for real coming up this weekend, their post-game press conferences. They're not answering any questions about their game. They only want to talk about the death of Breonna Taylor and why those who murdered her are still free. And they want to talk about that. The NFL is allowing the names of people who died at the hands of police brutality on the back of the helmets. You'll see it. Many people probably have the name George Floyd, if you will, on the back of their helmets underneath.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, that's coming. You'll see that. Obviously, the phrase Black Lives Matter is going to be on the courts for both the NBA and WNBA restarts. Again, sports plays quite a large role. That said, there are many people who are still quite resistant to seeing that and find it offensive. The number of times that I have received on Twitter the response of "stick to sports," I've lost track. But there are many times where life intervenes into the sports world, and the sports world leads the way. And when that happens, I talk about it. And I'm more than happy to have a conversation when people call into my show if it is counter to what I'm talking about. I'm always willing to have a conversation because that's the most important thing, is to talk about it, hash it out, so people do understand what is happening, why it is happening, what it intends to bring about.
Yeah, and it's I'm sure not as many times as you, but I've also received the stick to business, stick to education, and my response to that is I am. Because this is society, and business and education are interwoven with that. And I would say the same thing for you in the sport and entertainment world, is you are sticking to sport, you are sticking to entertainment, because this is part of that experience that we're having. And if we can mobilize sport and entertainment in a way to shape society in a more positive direction, that's a win-win for everybody.
I agree. It's just, again, as long as it's not cynical or in the same way that when we saw LeBron James a while ago discussing political and social events being told by Laura Ingraham of Fox News to shut up and dribble.
And dribble, yeah.
But when Drew Brees took the approach of saying that kneeling on the national anthem was something that he considered offensive, and that he thought, I'm paraphrasing here, was something that he would never understand. And many of his teammates who did take a knee were, again, 4 years ago, when this was happening, were completely upfront and communicative about why they were doing it. And it wasn't to be offensive and insulting. And thus Drew Brees had a conversation with his teammates. It was very tough. And he came out and apologized for not understanding their point of view. He may still stand for the national anthem, which, by the way, I do, and I make my children do, and stand up and take their hats off and their hands over their heart. And that's another thing about Midwest life that I learned at the University of Michigan when I went to my first Tigers game, being from New York City, in Yankee Stadium where I grew up. You clap over the last couple of lines of the national anthem. You get the things, the crowd riles up and claps over the last two lines of the national anthem. First time I did that in Tiger Stadium, I got a lot of dirty looks from the Michiganders there. And I understood, like, okay, you're in Detroit. We, Tiger fans, they stand and do not say a word until it's time to say play ball. And I understand that, and I respect it. It's having a conversation. So when Laura Ingraham comes out and says that Drew Brees is, being wrongfully forced to apologize, that he has a right to be heard, well, okay, so LeBron doesn't, but Drew does. We can all guess what the one major difference between these two superstars is. It's obvious. It literally is as plain as the nose and the color of their skin on their face. So as long as, again, it is not cynical, and as long as it has not done anything other than intended to bring and unite and inform, then I think it should have a place in sports. But I understand why some people, when they tune in to their favorite sports show or they tune into a game, they want to escape. That it is a form of escapism. The problem is that life intervenes sometimes. Yeah,
for sure. Let me shift back to the NFL. So I've got some questions coming in live here, and one of our alumni, Josh, is an employee in finance. He's the controller for the Buffalo Bills. So you're speaking to someone who came to the business school, came to the University of Michigan, 2 degrees from the university, and then went on into the NFL. And the question that he's asking is, what do you see as the NFL's biggest challenge during the pandemic, but also post-pandemic?
Well, I think the one during the pandemic is the most, obvious is trying to stay healthy, trying to keep everybody healthy and get through a playing season. It's important for a lot of people. There are a ton of people who depend upon the NFL to keep a roof over their head. And as a matter of fact, that's the roof, over my head right there, and so, but we're also talking about a bunch of people who work in front offices and other ancillary businesses that depend on the NFL. There's also the players and their families. There's also people who work in the league and their families. And there's also the matter of, if there is no playing season, do you put the Bengals on the clock first overall in 2021? Do they get the first overall pick? Like, how do you handle moving forward if there is no season? And there's a lot of reasons why a lot of sports are attempting to do that. But the number one thing, obviously, is to keep players healthy. And that's why I hope that people, you're already seeing it again in the Twitterverse, that, calling players selfish for opting out, you go first then, I mean, if a player decides to opt out, they have their reasons for doing so. They have a newborn, they have a sick parent, they've got young kids. I mean, honestly, we all have a lot of pressures here. So the pressure is to do it and do it safely and make sure everybody's, literally survives the playing season. And then post-pandemic, I would just say it's the NFL has it's just regular, good old-fashioned being there for a sports fan base that loves it and can't get enough of it. And I guess there's really no big challenge other than just continue on and do it in the best possible light, for everybody who's a sports fan of the NFL.
Yeah. Do you see any challenges? One of the things that surprised me this summer was some of the long-term commitments that NFL teams are making. The Mahomes contract would be the obvious big one. In light of some of the uncertainties and financial realities that teams may face in the short term, how do you reconcile that? How do you make sense of?
We're assuming that a vaccine's coming at some point, and that at some point we will, have to deal with COVID-19 in our lives. And figure out a way to have therapeutics or maybe an annual shot that you have to take, and is similar to the flu. I know that we keep saying it is not like the flu, but it is a respiratory illness. Again, in the same way that I became a labor law expert during the lockout, I feel like I've become a public health. I'm trying to learn as much as possible, since this is, again, what is affecting so much that's going on in the sports world. So I'm assuming that everything will be fine in the future. And, the remarkable thing about all this could be so different had the NFL Players Association not approved the collective bargaining agreement that was on the table between the league and the union. I think they voted about a week before Rudy Gobert tested positive for the Jazz, which really started everything off in terms of shutting everything down in the sports world. I think that vote had just happened. Had it gone the other way, and it was such a close vote that there was no collective bargaining agreement that had a 10-year chunk added to the end of the roadway that was staring everyone in the face after the 2021 season, I think this would be a totally different ball of wax.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And so now both sides do have the ability to take whatever financial hit that's coming for this year and I guess mix it into future years with salary caps and finances. And again, that's why I went to, LS&A. I didn't go to Ross. Like I'm more verbal than math. So I just leave it up to the Joshes of the world to figure that out from the financial perspective. But I think that's the way that they're going to handle it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let me turn to college real quick. What's the future of the NCAA? And the motivation behind my question is I found it really interesting. I mean, there's always been this debate of what's the role of the NCAA in major college sports. With COVID and the pandemic, I think it's become even more interesting because you have Power 5 conferences that are making individual decisions about how they're going to handle their conferences, which I think just shines an even brighter light on what's the role of the NCAA in collegiate athletics. What's your perspective on that?
Well, I think we can all safely say, and I know this is being recorded, but the NCAA is a hot mess, to use the phrase. It is just a red hot mess. And I am genuinely concerned about there not being a college football season. I mean, I honestly do not know if you are seeing what is happening in Major League Baseball with all the financial aspects and wherewithal that is at the disposal of the 30 clubs of Major League Baseball. And it took 3 days for one team to test as positive as it did in a sport that is inherently socially distant. Although I think I did see a member of the Cubs, I think it was Rizzo of the Cubs, hand a member of the Milwaukee Brewers who was holding on to first base a little bit of a dollop of Purell. I mean, I saw that over the weekend. When you've got a football season that is when you've got, again, a college, I guess you could have a bubble, but I honestly do not know what's going to happen, how there could possibly be dorm life this fall, and people being safe and not kids being kids on campus. I mean, I don't see how this is feasible under the current construct without a national plan of testing and contact tracing and anything that is required of a national mask wearing plan. I just don't see how this will all happen, and that all presidents of every single school will be on the same page. Notre Dame requiring a whole bunch of ACC schools to play it, essentially, because their schedule is like a United Nations of teams from different conferences on it, that I honestly am genuinely concerned. And then if there is no football, maybe they push it to the spring. But anybody who's coming out to play in the NFL, which I'm hoping, knock on wood, does have a full season and thus an on-time draft next April, I have no idea why, in all honesty, any player who's worth his salt would want to play in a spring season when he needs to be healthy for his ultimate dream to actually be paid for his work. It would be very difficult. So I am very concerned. I mean, I can't stress how concerned I am about the college football season right now and the effects it will have cascading throughout athletic department budgets across the country.
Yeah, I mean, we're already seeing it in many ways, right? You've got some of the smaller schools that depend on playing the big schools like Michigan. They're struggling because now they're not going to get that revenue. And then you also have major universities that are beginning to cancel the quote-unquote non-revenue sports from their portfolio, predicting the financial difficulties that you're foreshadowing.
Yeah, again, I'm eager to see. Rubber's going to have to meet the road soon. The old fail-safe moment is fast arriving for institutions of higher learning to decide where they place athletics in the order of importance and of having to be done. And yeah. I don't envy these decisions that are coming at all.
Yeah, it's I should say a number of the questions that came in advance of our conversation were really directed at me in terms of what's happening on campus in the fall and what will dorm life look like in academics and so forth. And I'm happy to take those questions.
Are you saying it's not about me?
There were more questions about sports and you, Rich.
Understand, at the very heart lies a thin-skinned, on-air television professional who needs to be loved. Okay.
Rich, we love you. All the way back to your Staten Island advanced days. I've been the president of your fan club.
I appreciate it. I feel better. Thank you. Look
That's
at you.
not going to change. But I'm happy to take those questions offline if folks have them. Rich, we're short on time. You brought up the draft. One of the things I've loved about you now for over 20 years is each year you stand up and you run the 40-yard dash for charity. I believe you've done it 21 years in a row. If I've
you hit the over on that. It started in 2005, actually.
Oh, I thought it was longer than that. Okay.
There's like many things in the television world. It started out of just a fit of boredom, waiting around to shoot something. I was sitting in the old RCA Dome, which is now the parking lot of Lucas Oil, where the combine takes place. But in the old home of the Colts, the RCA Dome, I'm sitting with Terrell Davis, the future Hall of Famer. He had just retired from the NFL, waiting to shoot that evening's program for NFL Network's combine coverage. And I asked him how fast he thought I could run the 40-yard dash. He looked at me and laughed. I cursed at him and went down in my suit and tie and lace-up dress shoes and ran the 40, not thinking it was being recorded at all because the crew was on break. But little did I know that there was a member of our camera staff on the field and that somebody was in the truck and hit record, and they surprised me with the video that night. And I ran it in a very slothful 6.77 seconds. And the next day, coaches would show up like Mike Holmgren of the Seahawks at the time, Joe Gibbs, who was then the coach of the now Washington football team. He wanted to see it. Coaches started to request it, and it kind of got a life of its own. I did it the next year again, and then again and again. And about 6 years ago, I was asked by the NFL if I wanted to add a charitable component to it. We chose St. Jude Children's Research Hospital for that. And so now I run in their honor, and we ask everybody to dress up in their work clothes in a safe for work manner and run the 40-yard dash at their workplace and put it on video, and we upload it. And now, I mean, it just is so moving to see firefighters in full fire gear and, doctors in lab coats running down hallways. And it really is moving and wonderful. And it raises a ton of money, thank God, for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, which, depends on all of their, for all of their money. It's all donation based. Make sure that families never see a bill for traveling there with their sick children. I mean, there, but for the grace of God, go any of us. So ever since about 6 years ago is when I started doing it for charity. But I am now a fine wine 51-year-old who does run in dress shoes now. I mean, in running shoes now, because other than jumping the shark comedically, I'm concerned about my health and not popping an Achilles doing this. But I'm running up. I broke 6 seconds this year as a 51-year-old man, so I'm very happy about that.
Well, and thank you for everything that you do for St. Jude's, and I always look forward to you running the 40, and I believe that was the fourth or fifth time you've broken 6 seconds, which at 51 is remarkable. And I'm placing bets with my friends and family on you breaking 6 seconds next year at the combine as well. So make me proud and make me some money.
Time for one more story?
Of course.
Time for one more?
Of course.
All right. This is one of my proudest moments ever. Okay. This is about 3-4 years ago when Jim Harbaugh asked me to be the honorary captain against Central Florida. At the Big House. And there I am coming out with the group of Michigan Wolverines for the coin toss. And I remember when we were heading out there, Jim Harbaugh, who was great, he let me speak to the team, and I spoke to the team the day before, and I think I blacked out talking to him. It's on YouTube somewhere. I mean, I literally, it was amazing. But here, as I'm walking out, my heart is literally beating out of my chest. As 100,000 fans are there, and I'm glad that there were guys to my left who were walking in the direction that I had to walk in. And before we left the sideline, Harbaugh said to all 5 of us, hey, if we win the toss, we want the ball, and if we don't, we're going in. I want to go in this direction. He pointed in a certain direction. So we step out there, and before the toss, they announce my name and whatever. And look, I don't really get introduced in front of a large audience very much, but 100,000 people politely applauding was really loud. I mean, just really, really loud. It just blew me away. And the only thing that I thought to do was like take off my cap, like I had just, pitched 8 innings as I'm, doffed my cap, heading off to the dugout. So I do that, and it's time for the toss. And in college football, the visiting team calls it in the air. So there wasn't any choice of do we take heads or tails? It was the other team that did it. And they won the toss and took the ball. And it was time to ask, the referee turns to the Michigan contingent and says, which way do you want to go? And Jake Butt, right there, turns to me and he gives me the international symbol of, do you know?
Do you remember?
And I'm like, Jake, I'm honorary captain. Really, I was supposed to pay attention to what...
You got a 50-50 chance, Rich.
You're used to catching passes in a building like this and focusing and concentrating. I am not. Really? Are you telling me? And so I turned to Jake. I said, I think that way, It's 50-50, right? Like the coin toss. It's 50-50. So I'm walking back to the sidelines, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, man, did I screw this up? The one thing, literally as an honorary captain, did I just screw that up? And Harbaugh is already hands on his knees, staring at the field. He's locked in. He's already got the Jim Harbaugh stare going on. And I walk up to him and I'm thinking, oh, please say I got it right. Harbaugh looks at me and he goes like this, hey, nice ovation. And I'm like,
you got it right. Well, and you did it. You approached it with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind. So, Rich, thank you so much for joining us. There are no words that can express just how much we love you, how much we're grateful for you. To everyone who joined us today, thank you for tuning in. Stay safe, stay healthy, take care of your loved ones, and forever, go blue.
Go blue.